Hello everybody. We have a game with the black pieces against Liuf, rated 1429. So we're getting up there now in rating, and we have a Caro Kann exchange on the board if he plays d4. Okay, he starts with the bishop, more or less the same. We can just develop a piece towards the center. Now he puts the pawn in the center. Maybe he's going to add further pressure to our knight, but not a big deal. I mean, we can develop and just pin the knight, so now it's restricted. He castles. We can calmly play e6, closing the pawn chain, opening our bishop. He attacks the bishop, and I'm just going to give it up for the knight. Now the knight can't jump in. It also doesn't defend this pawn. He recaptures with the queen so he doesn't ruin the pawn structure, but the queen also undefends the central pawn. So we can maybe force this trade if we want, because otherwise the knight may take the pawn. Do I want to do that? Okay, so I'm going to develop my queen here, which double hits the pawn, also forces the bishop to do something, and looks at the b pawn behind it, so maybe he's not as eager to develop his bishop somewhere. Worth a shot. Let's do it. It's pretty forcing. It limits his options. He can't just do what he wants now because he has a bunch of stuff hanging. Normally you just want to bring the bishop back and not trade it for the knight, but that would hang central pawn, so you can't do that. So you pretty much should take the knight. I'm going to take with the b pawn to reinforce my center and be able to play c5 again. I mean, not again, but I never played it in the first place. But I had a c pawn. I want to replace that c pawn. Okay, so he moves the same piece twice to defend the bishop, but that's weird. Like, what's the point of that? I can easily still kick the bishop. Oh, I see. Then he wants check, and then my queen's loose, so I take this way, but still, what's the point of all this? I'm not sure, so I'm just going to ignore him and develop. Bishop to its most active square in the center, and then I could even reinforce my knight, or I could develop this way. Not sure it's ever going to do anything here, because his knight will be contesting it. So maybe go this way, reinforce the pawn that attacks the center. It's all playable. It's all playable. So now he takes. So I can take either way because my queen's defended. So I think I'm still going to take this way and support the center. And if he takes, that's good for my structure and my rook. If he doesn't take, look, why do you put your queen here to begin with? Yeah, so he takes, but this is all really good for me. I could play c5, take recapture with a pawn. My rook is open. He just develops his knight in front of the c pawn. The c pawn usually does c3 or c4. But the knight's not actually pressuring anything. It has nowhere to go. Not the best move. I mean, now let's just bring our knight out. Simple development towards the center. We're ready to castle, but there's no queen, so maybe a king d7 is in the spirit. Who's to say? Not me. But I'm thinking king d7 because the central pawns block any activity towards the king. He doesn't have a light square bishop, and we have good light square defense. I don't know. Only two minor pieces on the board. It's probably very safe here. So I like black's position. I'd much rather be black. If we push the pawn, it opens up a square for his knight. Doesn't matter though. So he goes a3 just to reduce the rook pressure down the file. Makes sense, but it's kind of slow move. We can connect our rooks with castling or this. c5 here, bishop back. Do we care? Let's say he goes c3. Yeah, probably better not to do that. We could go the other way. But let's get our king. Let's finish our development, improve our position, improve our rooks, protect the center. And I kind of like how the pawns and the bishop are just in front. It's a nice construction. And my king is just, he wants to be on the front lines. He's a bold monarch. And this knight's kind of misplaced, so he'll have to waste time moving it. When he does, he'll release control over the central square. Maybe I'll hop my knight in at that point. And now that my king's in the center and not over here, maybe even I can pawn storm him. So he moves his rook, which stares down over here, which makes some sense. It also prevents the e5 pawn break. Although maybe, like I said, I want to keep this. Maybe I can keep it the way it is. Maybe I don't even need to play c5 anytime soon. And I can do this. So he has one minor piece left to develop. The most active square is g5, as he can't go here. This blocks his rook, and this is very passive. So I'm going to play h6 because it's a slow position. It prevents his development. It prepares our pawn storm towards his king, where we can potentially line up two rooks and face him on. So he launches an attack on this side of the board, trying to match us. The problem is two things. One, we didn't castle long. Our king is in the center, so you would have to, you would want to break in the center. It's more of like a c4 type thing than a b4, but I get what he's doing. He wants to break open the position to my king. The other downside is his rooks aren't connected, and when you don't finish your development, there's tactics. Bishop takes pawn. He can't recapture because rook takes rook. And now the game is over. It was a nice back and forth tug of war where I would prefer to be black, but now it's just game over. Once you take this pawn, his position collapses, as that pawn was also defending dark squares and no longer isn't. Also, the knight happens to be under attack with a pin, so he's kind of forced to do this, connecting the rooks, finishing his development. The knight is pinned. We could take it, we could keep the pin, we could retreat. If we take it and hop our knight in, hitting the bishop, he moves his bishop back. We can actually settle on the c4 outpost with our knight and have a good knight versus bad bishop scenario. And we are up a pawn, and then the a3 pawn might fall there, so that's kind of an easier endgame to play. We could just do that, simplify. But his knight's pretty bad too. We could keep the pin. They're all good options. If we keep the pin and he moves the rook somewhere, like what's the point of that? Let's just take it. And then we could hop our knight in here, right? Because it has these two, so it's improving a piece for free. And the whole point of this is to, in one go, try to get it to the outpost c4, because, or c3, but the bishop covers that, right? So that's not a practical outpost. So he goes here with the bishop, which is interesting because it stops my knight moves, or it threatens to trade. But I wonder now if I could play c5. And the bishop is trapped. Do you have to sack a rook there? Let's play c5. c5 with the pawn support is always much better than c5 without pawn support. Um, so this works out very well. You don't usually have a pawn supporting the c5 pawn push. It's usually pieces that you recapture with a knight or a bishop. But in this scenario, the bishop has no squares. We can recapture with a pawn, and our position has our pawn chain has no weaknesses. Our knight's not weak. This is severely weakening for him. Our rooks are connected. We can put one on the B file, the other on the A file. And the position plays itself. That's what they say. Because the plans are so much easier when there's no complications. And when your pawn chain's perfect, when you don't have weaknesses, it becomes much more obvious. Oh, there's two open, semi-open files. Well, that's where your rooks go, right? Your pawn chain is perfect. You don't have to do anything with it. Maybe you could push this here just to, fully make it invincible. But, your knight, they can't do anything except sack a rook or hit it with this pawn, which is just a terrible move for his position. So, plus the knight's happy to go to d6. It's also happy to reach the outpost c4. So as nice as it looks on e4, it's not actually an outpost because of f3, and that's a little bit annoying. But on c4, it's an outpost, and more importantly, that outpost hits a weak pawn. Because an outpost in and of itself, I mean, if they don't use those squares, or they can work around it, because there's limited material, like in a position like this one, then it may not be such a big thing. Okay, so he moves the rook and sacks the bishop instead of sacking the rook. So let's just take this. And now he wants to come in here with his rook. So he can very calmly bring our last piece into the game, and our plan is complete. Our position is perfect. And our king ended up being safe, even though it's a little bit exposed. We have, we're in time to contest these files. It's not like he's doubled and we can't put a rook there. Even the rook in front of your king would also keep it perfectly safe. So, also a knight on c4 limits rook squares, so that's really annoying for him. So yeah, the game is over. We're up a clean piece this knight, which happens to be nicely placed. Okay, so he moves his rook over. It's x-raying our king. So now he's hanging his pawn, but threatening to take our knight because of the pin, right? So you have to notice things like that. However, there is just the rook trade that removes any threats. Now maybe he wants to push c4 due to, again, this alignment. But we go knight c3, hitting the rook. c3 and c4 were both outposts. I was looking at c4 before because he had a dark square bishop on the board, which would have traded on c3, so I was choosing the better outpost. But now that there's no bishop, c3 is, it's not supported by a pawn, but it is deeper into the territory, so it's just as good. He might attack it though, so you might have to move, but that's not a big deal because your knight is happy to move. It can go so many places though. We can also throw in a check, which I like because it pushes his king a little further and it can't protect this pawn. So let's throw in an active rook move. Now we're behind his stuff. Good inclusion. Now when we can move the knight back to where it came from, but the difference is it hits this pawn, which is nice. So let's do that. If we had a queen instead of a rook, we would have moved our knight here to threaten checkmate in one. But because it's a rook, that's not a thing. Okay, so he's willing to hang the pawn, but it hits the rook. So if I go here and he counter hits my knight's hanging. There's really no point in that. He's attacking this pawn. I could do a number of things. Maybe improve my king is a good move. Yeah, let's just improve our king. Get it closer to these pawns, which are going to fall one way or another. You don't have to worry about them being passed because we're up a piece and our king is here to take them. You know, it's not a thing. You know, giving us a check and letting our king blockade is even better for us, so that's not scary. Pushing past, we can just target them from behind. That's not scary. There's nothing scary, you know, and he can't go and try to side check us with the help of the pressure of these pawns, creating a barrier, right? Pushing us backwards because we control the A file and we're behind him, so we can always just go harass him. This pawn's hanging, this pawn's hanging. Okay, so he decides to capture. Let's just take back, support the knight. He can't even check us. Well, now he can because he kicks the knight. But I feel like knight d6 is a really nice consolidating square. Where else? This hits the rook, but what's the point? This check, he goes here. It's not mate. Yes, let's just go back to the nice square here. And we'll just maybe take this pawn with our rook, and then we'll just commence operations. Yeah, maybe we'll take this. Okay, he sacks the pawn, which I don't understand. Thank you. I think he thought I was going to take with the king, and he was going to do this. But that was, yeah, so that was what he thought. He just realized, whoops, and he resigns, which is nice. Now I don't have to convert, which is always helpful. But he was down a minute to a minute, and I was at 2 minutes, so which is rare in our games that we're up on time. So it wasn't going to end well for them. Let's go through the game. So we get a Caro Kann. Potentially. And we get the exchange. He throws in this check. Development and center. Development and center. Center and development. And he hit my bishop, so forced reaction. You can take, you can also not take and retreat somehow. But I take to control the dark squares in the center. And then I develop for free. Although there are definitely other moves than queen b6, but playable enough. And then development in center. Force move, and it improves our position. Force move, and development. Development in center. And as of here, it says black is, minus 0.7. So like I said, I'd rather be black here. It looks a lot more comfortable and easy to play. King safety, development, and center. And the engine doesn't, scream at me, so that's always nice. Prophylaxis, anti-development. And then he just blunders. So we were about, almost a pawn better here, just positionally. But then he blunders the pawn, so we see the tactic and we take it, take free stuff. And then trades are good for us, so free stuff. Improving move for free. Improving move for free. Free stuff. And yeah, he should have sacked the rook. Probably his best try because we get the rook, but then the bishop takes the pawn. Our king is a little more exposed. We have this weird pawn on e4. His bishop is alive and controls a ton of squares. So his best try, but he didn't go for it. He tried to just sack the bishop instead. Free stuff. Improving a piece for free because trades are good. And also the rook is hanging. So he moves the rook. Free stuff because trades are wins. Improve a piece for free. Improve a piece for free. Force move for free. improve a piece. And it gets out of the alignment, which is nice. -6. Game's over. Force move. Force move. Oh, I had the tactic there. Duh, I missed it. I could have sacked my rook, luring the king this way, forcing it that way, and then just got the rook and just had played up a knight to make the conversion easier. That's a cool move. But I just consolidated and then free stuff and he resigned. So which one was faster? Haha. Okay, so 20 center pawn, 96% accuracy. So perfect game. I just want to see one thing. What is the best? I mean, I know queen b6 is fun and attacks a lot of stuff, but what's the best? So you can play a6 and just kind of force it, which is similar. You can play, just develop your bishop, your knight, which are obvious, and rook over. So they're all the same. It's all the same junk. All right. So that was a good game. Hope you guys enjoyed the Caro Kann, decimating white in the exchange variation with simple moves and verbal logic. So good luck in your chess. I'll see you in the next video.